to learn more about the origins of Puerto Rico's fiscal problems and what's needed to help restore fiscal balance and economic growth. It's my hope that we'll have a valuable discussion based on facts and informed by our witnesses' expertise. Puerto Rico's debt crisis didn't happen overnight. It's been years in the making. Fundamentally, the starting point for any solution is first identify the problem and understand the size and scope. Unfortunately, confusion reigns as Puerto Rico has failed to provide audited financial statements for the past 2 years. What we do know is that for many years, as Puerto Rico's economy suffered, debt and spending increased to the point where the island lost investor confidence. Puerto Rico has defaulted on certain debt obligations, lost access to normal markets, and now faces a liquidity crisis. The governor and others have stated that the island's current debt is not payable. Puerto Rico's economy has suffered for decades in part because of barriers to job creation and labor force participation, the federal minimum wage mandate, generous entitlement programs, red tape in the bureaucracy, and a bloated public sector have stifled business activity. This has a direct impact on Puerto Rico's residents. They are, of course, our fellow U.S. citizens. High unemployment rates have resulted in a declining population as Puerto Ricans have left the island to search for better jobs. A diminished population means lower tax revenue to fund government. Despite these long-term economic challenges for many years, Puerto Rico maintained a balanced budget and high credit ratings on its debt. So, what then led to fiscal crisis that the island faces today? While the economic challenges may be debatable, it's clear that since 2000, Puerto Rico's public debt has risen from 60% of GDP to now more than 100%. This is an indication of serious fiscal mismanagement. Thanks to highly attractive triple tax exempt status of its bonds, it was easier for the island to borrow and paper over deficits rather than address financial shortcomings and economic realities in order to balance the budget. The consequences of this decision is an accumulation of approximately $72 billion of debt arising from roughly 17 different debt issuers. This includes more than $18 billion in constitutionally protected general obligation debt, and also around $24 billion in debt issued by public corporations like the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority. Moreover, because of its triple tax exempt status, a wide array of investors own Puerto Rican bonds. According to Bloomberg, Puerto Ricans alone hold $20 billion of the debt, and nearly 60% of the Puerto Ricans' debt is held largely in individual retirement accounts and 401ks of regular folks throughout the United States. I'm told that approximately 16,000 Iowans are invested in funds that hold PREPA bonds, and of course, these folks aren't vultures. They're middle-class Americans who probably knew little about Puerto Ricans' finances. They simply invested in one of the many tax-exempt municipal bond funds containing Puerto Rican bonds. Notwithstanding all this, we're told that Puerto Rico's debt needs to be restructured in order to address its fiscal challenge. Puerto Rico, though, lacks access to an orderly debt restructuring mechanism like Chapter 9 of the Bankruptcy Code. Thus, Congress has been called upon to extend Chapter 9 to Puerto Rico public corporations, or to create a broad new bankruptcy regime that people have dubbed as Super Chapter 9 to restructure all debt, including the island's constitutionally guaranteed general obligation bonds. According to a recent New York Times article, I quote, Advisors to the island's government have been urging the government to default on debt, saying that the only catastrophe would move Congress, especially Republicans, to help, end of quote. I hope the governor will tell us whether this is accurate. If so, it would be troubling to me greatly if it's true. This isn't the first time Congress has been asked to help address a situation like Puerto Rico now faces. In the past, we've provided help in a bipartisan way. During the 1990s, the District of Columbia faced a fiscal crisis as it was insolvent and unable to pay. Congress worked with the district and the Clinton administration officials to pass the District of Columbia Financial Responsibility and Management Assistance Act in 1995. We'll hear more about the response to that crisis and other from our witnesses today. I'll note that Congress considered extending Chapter 9 to District of Columbia, but decided that there was, quote, little practical significance or advantage to such a legislative gesture, end quote. The committee report to that bill stated, quote, the issues facing the District of Columbia require political and structural as well as financial remediation, end quote. One of the reasons extending Chapter 9 to the district was rejected is because it's designed primarily to restructure and decrease municipal debt. The idea being that relief from creditors is what's needed in order to gain a fresh start. But Chapter 9 cannot bring about financial rehabilitation. It does not increase economic growth or alter fundamental fiscal trajectory. In short, Chapter 9 cannot address the root causes of fiscal problems, but instead pushes them off to future generations. As for Super Chapter 9, this is something that no state can do and has been described as, quote, unprecedented in American context, end of quote. It would be a bad idea with negative consequences for Congress to permit Puerto Rico to walk away from its constitutional debt obligations. Unlike other bonds, constitutional debt, whether issued by Puerto Rico or any of our states, has that government's full faith and credit commitment to repay the debt. And let's not forget that Puerto Rico issued its bonds with the knowledge that Chapter 9 bankruptcy wasn't an option in the event of default. Is it fair to retroactively change the rules at the expense of these investors if other options exist for addressing Puerto Rico's debt problems? At the very least, this is an idea that should be at the end of the line, not at the front of the line. The challenges Puerto Rico face are great and require more than just short-term solutions that don't provide long-term relief. The debt is a symptom of a bigger problem. Merely extending debt restructuring authority, absent tools to address the fundamental causes of the fiscal problem, is not a long-term solution that will help Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico has struggled to make the difficult decisions to cut spending and balance its budget. If Congress is to act, then we must ensure that Puerto Rico has the tools to help itself out of the situation. Today's hearing can help us identify what may or may not need to be considered for Puerto Rico to get its balance sheet back in order.